The moment you hear the words based on a true story, you know the show is bound to be good. And indeed there is such a TV series. Apart from using pseudonyms at the request of the survivors, all other content remains unchanged. This is the American series named Fargo. The story takes place in a small town in Minnesota. One day, our protagonist, Lester, is out shopping for a washing machine when he unexpectedly runs into the big guy who used to bully him in high school. Lester politely says hello, but in return, he only receives the man's scorn. "What was the name of that girl you used to hang out with in high school? You know, she even helped me take care of business. Those plump hands of hers. At our high school reunion we got together, and now we've been married for 18 years. Humiliated like this, the meek Lester still chose to endure it, saying he had somewhere to be and quickly turning to leave. But the big guy clearly didn't want to let him go. He made Lester stand still. He wanted to show his sons how he used to teach Lester a lesson. "When I punch him, I always write my name on my fist first so everyone knows who did it." And just like that, Lester got his nose broken by a punch and had no choice but to go to the hospital. While waiting, he opened a bottle of soda. But with a broken nose, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't drink it. Just then, a man next to him suddenly spoke up. "Can I have a sip?" Lester hesitated slightly, but his good-natured personality led him to hand the bottle over. The two took the opportunity to chat. The man named Malvo asked about Lester's nose. "What happened to you?" Lester recounted the incident. After hearing the story, Malvo was surprised and asked Lester why he didn't fight back. Because, in his experience, if the guy broke his nose this time, he'd break his spine next time. "If it were me, I would have killed that guy." Lester thought Malvo was joking and blurted out, "Why don't you go take care of him for me?" But he never imagined that the seemingly gentle man before him was a cold-blooded, professional hitman. And so, a casual joke set things in motion. Soon after, Malvo found his way to the big guy's company. Seeing his two sons fooling around, the kind-hearted man offered some advice. "You're not doing it right. You have to use your forearm to press on the back of his neck like this to make him suffocate." At that moment, the big guy heard the noise, came out, and asked the stranger what he was doing there. "I just wanted to see what you look like. Now I've seen enough." The big guy was momentarily confused. That evening, he went to a bar alone for a drink, completely unaware that the stranger from earlier was sitting right behind him, watching intently. When he stood up to stretch, he suddenly vomited blood. A sharp dagger, wielded by Malvo, was plunged into the back of his neck. When the police arrived at the scene, they only found the big guy's cold corpse. The next day, Lester heard the news of the big guy's murder from a colleague. This terrified him. He never thought his joke from yesterday would become a reality. He vaguely guessed who the killer was but still wanted to find him to confirm. So he drove around town looking for any sign of Malvo. He finally found him in a diner. As soon as he saw Malvo, Lester rushed to ask, "Did you kill that big guy?" Malvo's answer terrified Lester so much he was speechless. How could this timid and obsequious man have ever imagined that a single joke of his could cause someone's death? However, what Malvo said next would completely change Lester's life. "Your problem is you've spent your whole life thinking there are rules. There aren't. We used to be apes. All we had is what we could protect. If you don't have the guts to stand up for yourself, you'll be forgotten." At that moment, Lester, who had lived a cowardly life, felt a profound tremor within him. His wife had always looked down on him, mocking him for not making enough money. The washing machine at home was broken, and he couldn't even afford a new one. She even used his successful younger brother to belittle him. His unfulfilling job, combined with his wife's daily cold and harsh words, had long filled his heart with resentment. And Malvo's words today seemed to have opened a door to a whole new world for him. Returning home, Lester immediately started trying to fix the washing machine. Just then, his contemptuous wife came down to the basement. Seeing him fixing the machine, a look of disdain crossed her face as if to say, "You think you have the ability to do that?" To prove himself to his wife, Lester told her to turn the machine on to test it, then turn it off again. Just as his wife predicted, after Lester's tinkering, the washing machine was completely broken. She didn't understand what Lester was trying to do. But Lester remembered Malvo's words. "I'm being a man. You're not even half a man." His wife still thought he was the same weak-willed husband she could order around as she pleased, and continued to provoke him with her words. Little did she know, her words would unleash a sealed demon. Lester had reached the brink of collapse. He looked at the hammer in his toolbox and gave his wife one last warning. "Take that back." Lester had completely snapped. He raised the hammer and brought it down on his wife's head, again and again, unleashing 18 years of pent-up emotions. Blood splattered everywhere. When he finally calmed down, he realized his wife's head was a bloody mess. The once gentle Lester was horrified by the sight. He then looked at a poster on the wall. Composing himself, he took off his blood-stained clothes and hid the murder weapon inside the washing machine. But this was his first time doing something like this. He had no experience cleaning up a crime scene, so he called Malvo for help. Unexpectedly, Malvo actually agreed to help him. However, after hanging up, Lester took out the shotgun hidden in his closet. It turned out he didn't actually want Malvo's help. He wanted him to come and take the fall. The evil in a person is like Pandora's box. Once opened, it's very hard to close again. Soon after, there was a knock at the door. Lester thought it was Malvo, but when he opened the door, it was the town's police chief, Vern. He was there about the big guy's case. A nurse at the hospital had seen Lester talking to him yesterday. Lester was extremely nervous because his wife's body was still in the basement. As fate would have it, Vern saw a bloodstain on the floor. Vern went down to the basement to check and discovered Lester's wife's body. He immediately called for backup, but didn't notice someone standing behind him. Malvo calmly dispatched Vern as if it were a routine task like eating or sleeping. After confirming Vern was dead, Malvo put down the shotgun and went into the basement. Seeing the shotgun, Lester prepared to continue with his plan. But before he could act, police backup burst in. Lester nervously informed Malvo, but there was no sign of him in the basement anymore. Meanwhile, Officer Molly quickly discovered the police chief's body on the floor. At this point, Lester had no way out, but he didn't choose to just wait for his fate. He looked at the poster on the wall, gritted his teeth, and slammed his head into it. A few days later, Lester woke up in a hospital bed. Because of his meek appearance, he had miraculously escaped all suspicion. But Officer Molly still suspected him. After all, such a coincidence was too hard to believe. The big guy was killed one day, and the next day the police chief investigating the case died at his house. But the new police chief, Bill, was an old high school classmate of Lester's. In his memory, Lester was a kind, pitiful person. He believed the big guy's death was the result of fierce competition in the local trucking industry. As for the tragedy at Lester's house, it was surely the work of a drifter. But under Molly's persistence, Bill could only reluctantly go with her to see Lester. Faced with Molly's questions, Lester initially managed to respond naturally. However, as Molly's questions became more pointed, Lester began to get flustered, stammering and unable to answer. Just as he was about to slip up, Bill stepped in to smooth things over for him, then forcefully pulled Molly away. "Leave the poor guy who just lost his wife alone." This made Lester breathe a sigh of relief. As he saw them off, he reluctantly said, "She was a good woman, a good wife." At this moment, Lester was no longer the meek person everyone thought he was. Elsewhere, Malvo was preparing to leave town when he was stopped by a patrol officer who asked for his license and registration. The officer was so intimidated by Malvo's presence that he silently watched Malvo leave, unknowingly saving his own life. Meanwhile, Officer Molly tirelessly collected case files, determined to catch the culprit behind these crimes to avenge the deceased police chief. But she struggled without concrete evidence and could only investigate quietly. A few days later, Lester was discharged from the hospital. The first thing he did was go to the basement to retrieve the murder weapon hidden in the washing machine. Keeping it was a constant risk. Since the house was still a crime scene, Lester clearly couldn't live there safely. So, he packed his bags and went to stay with his younger brother. Lester's brother was successful with a happy family. When his wife was alive, she often used his brother to put him down. After some time, Lester thought things had blown over, and went to a pharmacy to buy some anti-infection medicine. This was because when Malvo shot Chief Vern with the shotgun, a buckshot pellet had passed through Vern and hit Lester. Unexpectedly, Molly suddenly appeared, wanting to ask him about the case. Lester panicked, didn't even get the medicine he wanted to buy, and hurriedly left. He then called Chief Bill to complain. Bill was furious about Molly's unauthorized actions, because he had already told Molly that the gentle Lester was definitely not the killer. He told Molly to investigate other cases. Not long before, Molly had discovered a frozen corpse in the snow. Through investigation, the man was an employee of a company who had been dragged out of his office a few days prior. Watching the man on the surveillance footage, Molly vaguely felt it was related to the murders in town. At the same time, Lester sat at home, his wife's nagging words echoing in his ears, constantly replaying the scenes from that day. At this moment, he finally realized that running away wouldn't solve any problems. So, he immediately drove to his company. Seeing Lester's sudden appearance, his colleagues were very surprised, not expecting him to overcome the grief of losing his wife so quickly and return to work. And Lester's first task back at work was to handle the insurance for his old classmate, Sam Hess, the big guy. Sam's wife showed no grief over her husband's death. She only cared about when she could get the money. To get the insurance money quickly, she even tried to seduce Lester. Her son, standing outside the door, saw this and his worldview was shaken. He even accidentally injured his brother. After all, just a few days ago they were mocking Lester with their father. At the same time, in the woods, two mysterious men were watching everything. It turned out Sam Hess had been secretly working for a mob. These two men were enforcers sent by the boss to avenge Sam. Seeing the ambiguous interaction between Lester and Sam's wife, they naturally became suspicious of Lester. The next second, they appeared in front of him. Just as they were about to attack Lester, Officer Molly suddenly appeared like a godsend. Although Lester hated her at this moment, he was extremely grateful for her presence. In front of the police, the two hitmen could only temporarily retreat. Lester thought Molly was there to bother him about the case again, but Molly said she came for insurance advice. In case something happened to her one day, she could leave some money for her family. As Lester was looking for documents for her, Molly accidentally dropped her file on the floor, deliberately revealing a photo of Malvo in front of Lester. Lester immediately tensed up, not understanding Molly's true intentions. He made an excuse that it was almost closing time and asked Molly to leave. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Malvo had taken on a new identity and a new mission. This time, his client was a supermarket tycoon. He had received a blackmail letter demanding $40,000, or his secret would be exposed. The tycoon hoped Malvo would find the blackmailer for him. And Malvo did not disappoint, finding the blackmailer in just one day. But after questioning him, he learned that the man didn't actually have any of the tycoon's secrets. He sent the blackmail letter just to see if he could scare some money out of him. But upon hearing this, Malvo smelled a business opportunity. The supermarket tycoon's secret must be very valuable. He took over the entire blackmail scheme, sending another letter to the tycoon, increasing the price to $1 million. At the same time, he secretly snuck into the tycoon's house and replaced his painkillers with strong hallucinogens. After taking the swapped pills, the supermarket tycoon's nerves began to fray, and he started having hallucinations. The water from his shower turned into blood. His supermarket was suddenly infested with locusts. These events corresponded one by one with ancient prophecies. And the final prophecy was that he would lose his son. The tycoon's psychological defenses finally crumbled. He agreed to hand over $1 million in exchange for his son's life. He then called the disguised Malvo. The two arranged a meeting point. The personal trainer, after learning the scam was successful, became arrogant, dreaming of a 60-40 split with Malvo since the idea was his. But Malvo told him to help him hold a package on the floor. "What's this tape for?" When the trainer woke up, he found himself strapped to a piece of gym equipment. Malvo taped a shotgun to his hand, then aimed it outside and fired randomly, successfully luring the police. Meanwhile, he drove off to collect the money. The police, unaware of the situation, surrounded the house, thinking there was a terrorist inside. The SWAT team broke down the door and vaguely saw a man pointing a gun at them. "Suspect has been eliminated." I repeat, suspect has been eliminated. Just like that, Malvo effortlessly got rid of the only person who knew about the plan. He thought it was a foolproof plan, but unexpectedly, two roadblocks appeared on the road, forcing his car to a stop. Then without a word they opened fire on him. Malvo was genuinely confused, not knowing who sent these two. At that moment Molly and Gus were having dinner nearby. Hearing the gunshots they immediately rushed to the scene. Malvo used the cover of the blizzard to successfully shake the two hitmen. As he walked he found a small log cabin. He deliberately cut the back of his hand, dripping blood on the ground. As expected, the bearded man followed the blood trail and found him. He was immediately ambushed and killed by Malvo. After dealing with the bearded man, Malvo disappeared into the blizzard. By the time Molly and Gus arrived, they only saw the bearded man's body. Gus turned around and realized Molly was gone. This made Gus extremely tense. Visibility was getting lower. Gus vaguely saw a figure running towards him. On reflex, he fired a shot at the person. When Gus got closer, he realized the person he shot was Molly. Lester woke up from his coma. Seeing the police guarding his door, he immediately realized something was wrong. So he quickly pulled out his drip, intending to escape the hospital. Unexpectedly, his own brother happened to be visiting. He thought his brother was there to care for him, but instead he heard the most bitter words from his brother's mouth. "You've always been a huge burden to me. I've had enough." His brother's words were the last straw for Lester. From then on, the kind and gentle Lester disappeared. In his place was a new Lester, cunning and willing to do anything to achieve his goals. To quietly leave the hospital room, he carried his bandaged, mummy-like roommate to his bed, then wrapped himself in bandages to impersonate his roommate. After being wheeled out by a nurse, he quickly escaped the hospital. In the few minutes the nurse was away, Lester had hatched a terrifying plan in his mind. First, he returned to his basement and retrieved the hammer from behind the poster. Then he found some suggestive photos of his wife and one of her panties. Next, he snuck into his brother's house, used the spare key to open his brother's gun cabinet, and put the hammer, photos, and panties inside. Then he took out a handgun and put it in his eldest nephew's backpack. After finishing these tasks, he was about to leave when his nephew suddenly returned and saw him. Just as Lester thought his plan had failed, his nephew silently turned away because he had always treated his uncle as if he were invisible. Just like that, Lester left with ease, then disguised himself as his roommate and returned to the hospital. No one noticed he had been out. Sitting on his hospital bed, recalling his meticulous calculations, a smile involuntarily appeared on his face. Everything went according to Lester's script. The next day at school, two classmates fooling around knocked over his nephew's backpack. The handgun inside slid out. Soon, the police arrived at Lester's brother's house with a search warrant. The brother received a call from his wife, dropped his work and rushed home. Because in his gun cabinet, he had illegal weapons. But the shocking discovery wasn't that, but a bloody hammer, along with his sister-in-law's photos and underwear. Everyone present was horrified. The truth behind the deaths of Lester's wife and Chief Vern was about to be revealed. Soon Lester was brought to the interrogation room. He heard from Chief Bill about everything found at his brother's house. At this moment, in everyone's eyes, Lester became an extremely pitiful person, betrayed by his wife and brother. And it seemed fate was on his side. Molly, the only one with any sense in the whole show, was hospitalized with a gunshot wound. Just like that, after a few simple questions, Lester was declared innocent, while his brother would face a long prison sentence. At this time, Malvo was not idle either. The sudden appearance of the two hitmen had ruined his blackmail scheme, causing him to lose $1 million. He naturally had to settle this score. After finding out who was behind the two hitmen, Malvo single-handedly stormed the gang's headquarters. And just like that, he wiped out an entire gang and disappeared without a trace. After being discharged, Molly still wanted to continue investigating Lester, but was informed that the killer had been caught. It was Lester's brother. This stunned her. She didn't know what had happened while she was in a coma. Molly proposed to the chief that they continue investigating Lester, but was criticized by him for being too eager for credit. He ordered her to immediately stop the investigation. This made Molly feel completely helpless. Could she only watch as the real killer roamed free, letting the truth be buried? Time flies, and a year later, Lester's career and love life are both flourishing. Not only did he marry a beautiful colleague from his company, but he was also voted Salesman of the Year. On stage, he was incredibly smug, exuding confidence. Compared to the timid, weak, and easily bullied Lester from a year ago, he was a completely different person. After the year-end party, Lester went to a bar alone. There he noticed a familiar figure, the man who had changed his entire life. Even if he were reduced to ashes, he would never forget him. After careful consideration, Lester still decided to go up and say hello. But the Malvo before him pretended not to know him. Because at this time, Malvo had taken on a new identity. His name was Mike, a dentist about to marry a beautiful and wealthy fiancée. The group at the table was clearly his new target. Lester's sudden appearance could very well ruin his year-long plan. So Malvo got up, preparing to leave with his friends. If it were the old Lester, he probably would have stopped. But the new Lester would not. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, Lester rushed in. The old Lester might have let it go, but I won't. Lester, is this what you want? Hearing Lester's answer, his expression immediately turned grim. Then, to Lester's horror, Malvo pulled out a gun and shot everyone in the elevator in the head, including his soon-to-be fiancée. Only then did Lester remember how terrifying Malvo was. Malvo had spent 6 months with these people. During that time, he had to endure the discomfort of sticking his hands into so many stinky mouths. Now because of Lester it was all ruined. But he didn't kill Lester. Instead, he told Lester to help him dispose of the bodies. Lester knew Malvo wouldn't let him go. To completely escape this murderous demon, Lester tricked his wife into going on a trip, and they would leave that very night. At the same time, Gus, who had switched to being a mailman, was delivering mail when a red car sped past him. The driver's appearance looked somewhat familiar. He was now married to Molly, and they had a child together. Molly still worked as a police officer, a job she loved. She had never given up on Lester's case. The walls of her house were covered with information she had collected, but she had no idea that the murderous demon had returned to town. Malvo went to Lester's old house but found it had been sold to someone else. Fortunately, from the new owner, he got the address of Lester's company. That evening, Lester bought plane tickets. Now, he just needed to go to the office to get his passport and he could leave. But as he approached the company, the cautious Lester parked his car around a corner. Then, using the excuse of a sore back from lifting luggage, he asked his wife to go in and get the passport for him. His wife, unsuspecting, prepared to get out of the car. Lester called her back. "It's cold out. Put on your hood. I don't want your pretty face to get frostbite." His wife thought her husband was being considerate, never suspecting he was setting her up to be a scapegoat. Just like that, Lester watched his wife walk step by step towards death's door. Just as his wife got the passport, Malvo suddenly appeared behind her. Seeing her wearing Lester's coat, he pulled the trigger without hesitation. Soon Malvo realized he had killed the wrong person. But it was dark outside and he didn't notice Lester hiding in the car. Seeing Malvo leave, Lester then entered the company, stepped over his wife's body on the floor, opened the safe and took the passport inside. At this point, he could have chosen to flee, but after a moment's thought, he put the passport back, then put the car keys in his wife's hand. He went to a nearby coffee shop and told the owner he was waiting for his wife there. His wife had gone to the company to get something. He then excused himself to go to the restroom, and when no one was looking, he snuck out the back door. He used a public phone to call the police, saying he heard gunshots coming from the insurance company in town. Soon police sirens were heard outside. Molly, who was pregnant at home, also received a call from her colleagues. There had been a murder in town, and the deceased was Lester's wife. So, a very pregnant Molly went to the crime scene and witnessed Lester's elaborate performance. Lester was taken to the police station for questioning. Also present were 2 FBI agents. They believed the gang massacre a year ago, and the elevator murders a few days ago were all committed by a man named Malvo. And the death of Lester's wife was very likely related to this man. They hoped Lester would cooperate with the police to lure and capture Malvo. And this was exactly Lester's goal, to use the police to eliminate Malvo. Then Molly started assigning tasks to her colleagues. At this moment, Gus called her, begging her not to get involved, because Malvo was a nightmare he could never shake off. He didn't want anything to happen to his wife and their unborn child. Finally, under Gus's persuasion, Molly agreed to stay at the station and not go to the front lines. On his end, Gus had just hung up the phone when he saw a red car parked next to the log cabin. It was the same car he had seen not long ago. Just as he was about to get closer to check, he saw Malvo walking out of the cabin. After confirming Malvo had left, Gus entered the cabin. Elsewhere, Agents Budge and Pepper escorted Lester home. As soon as they arrived, Lester rushed into the basement to look for a box. Malvo also quickly found his way there, easily taking out Budge and Pepper who were guarding outside. Lester saw everything through the window. He rushed upstairs to the second floor, while Malvo pried open the door and entered the house. As soon as he stepped in, he vaguely heard Lester on the phone with the police upstairs. He followed the sound to a room, preparing to silently eliminate Lester. As a result, he fell into a trap. After waiting a while with no sound, Lester gathered his courage and opened the door. There was no sign of Malvo in the room. He followed a trail of blood and found that Malvo had escaped. At this moment, Lester was incredibly smug. He had proven with his own actions that he was the strongest. Meanwhile, Malvo dragged his injured leg back to the small cabin. Just as he was bandaging his wound, a figure appeared behind him. Gus took the opportunity of his injury to eliminate him. And so, Malvo's life of crime came to an end. Soon, the police received a notification and arrived, also discovering a box of audio tapes. One of them was clearly labeled with Lester's name. Inside, it recorded his crimes. At this point, Molly finally had the evidence to convict Lester. The police then began to pursue him. Seeing this, Lester immediately turned his car around and fled. The police followed closely behind. After a chase, Lester's snowmobile flipped over. He had no choice but to continue on foot. The police shouted for him to turn back, that it wasn't safe ahead, but Lester couldn't stop anymore. From the moment he killed his wife, he could never stop. The value of a film lies in its reputation, while the value of a film review lies in the feeling it conveys. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What did you think of this series? Let me know in the comments below.